So hello, I'm looking at everyone in chat, and thank you so much for the warm welcome. We'll go ahead and begin. There's a lot that he's been working with today, and these past 3 months, I'll tell you, he wasn't the easiest person to channel. I'll be straight up authentic with you. It took me a good 2.5 months to get a good solid connection with him, because he and I operate really quite differently. He is a storyteller. He likes to teach by telling me unique stories about his life and about mine. And that's how we've been getting along. And finally, over the course of the past week, after I asked him, okay, why aren't you talking to me very much? And he said, because you don't listen very well to me. So I began to listen from my heart center, and he taught me a lot about dropping into compassionate listening. He taught me a lot about compassionate service. And normally when I channel beings that are ascended, they come to me and they just load me with information, and there's so much to say, and I show up and you guys get to see me talking 1,000 miles per minute and channeling very quickly, and it just isn't the case with him. What he has taught me is patience. And for those of you who know me, that's really not my forte. And he taught me tolerance, he taught me grace, he taught me compassionate listening, and most importantly, he taught me compassionate service, not strictly to you guys in the form of benevolence, but to myself. And that's where I'm coming from today. He has a lot to say. So I'm going to go ahead and start answering your questions. What else can I tell you? Oh yeah, I'll introduce myself. I am Pamela Aaralyn. I'm a clear conduit channel. I've been channeling ascended beings since age 5. You can find me at aurareader.com for further information. A lot of you are asking me about how to join these types of live channelings. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can join them by requesting from our website at aurareader.com. We have an email list. Join the newsletter, which is just a brief once-a-month newsletter, and you'll know well in advance who we are channeling and get the live links. You can also join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/aurareader. And those are 2 ways that you can join live. Another way, if you can't be here to join, is to go to my fan page on Facebook. You can search it there. I'm Pamela Aaralyn on Facebook. And on Instagram, you can request and message us there as well to join these sessions. But you can ask your questions from the Facebook event page. And if you can't be here, we do look at those questions as well. I do try to bounce back and forth between the questions here and the Facebook event page. We prefer not to have questions emailed to us because we get a lot of emails and it's hard to keep up with. So if you don't mind keeping them to the Facebook event page and here, that would be awesome for the future YouTube listeners. So again, thank you for being here. I'm going to go right ahead into your questions and into some of the topics that he asked me to address today. First of all, he's very, very, very interested in ascension, and a few questions came in about ascension from some friends of mine earlier this afternoon, and they were very good questions about the law of attraction, ascension, and even love in regards to emotional states. So I'd like to address those 3 questions to him first. I'm going to change my mind because he said so, and he gave me full allowance to do so. There's someone in chat who's asking, what's it like on the other side, and how is his ascension process going? What he's saying is that it is exactly how he thought it was going to be. It's love. Everything is in perfect divine order. And this leads me into the whole question about, is he ascended, is he not? And he gave a very interesting answer when I asked him this yesterday as well, and he's saying the same thing now. He says, ascension isn't relevant under the laws of perfect divine order when there is no chaos, when there is nothing to attract. And another person asked me earlier today how he views the Abraham Hicks law of attraction from his point of relevance now. And of course, they wanted to know, is he hanging out with Jerry Hicks? when she asked me that, Jerry Hicks actually popped up behind him and just gave a brief little wave. So that confirmed it. And he did nod, and they both gave a laugh and said that everyone would indeed ask that. So they have a unique connection. They have a similar sense of humor. They have a similar presence, and they are indeed helping each other, and they are learning from each other, and they are coming together. And this is not the first time. When I was first attempting to channel Wayne Dyer, Abraham Hicks came through me. So that was an interesting association, because I've never channeled Abraham Hicks, and that began at that moment. So that was a few weeks ago, and I thought, oh, well, this is definitely going to be an interesting one. So yes, he is hanging out with Jerry Hicks. Yes, they are having a blast. Both of them are very fifth dimensional. But insofar as where he sees the law of attraction now, his answer is the law of attraction is not a law in other dimensions. There's nothing to attract when everything is in perfect divine order. Everything is aligned. So there you go. There's nothing. And I get that, because this is a universe that is primarily based upon the laws of duality, and polarities, and, sun and moon and feast and famine and war and peace and so much. And it's not that way in the fifth dimension and up. It's just not. That's primarily second, third, and fourth dimensions. That isn't applicable where he is. And he seems to be bouncing around between the fifth and the seventh, going back and forth in various teachings. But he really, really enjoys the fifth. Another interesting thing that when you asked me that question, Dolores Cannon popped in, and for those of you who are familiar with my work, I love channeling Dolores Cannon. She is one of my absolute favorite ascended beings that is in existence, with the exception of Nikola Tesla. And she came through and popped up and said he is an alchemist of the heart. He is a quantum healer from the heart. He is an emotional alchemist, and he is a soul alchemist. And she said that quantum energy is not something he's unfamiliar with, and that he still is a master of this to this very day. Now he's stepping through right now, and he said, I am a jack of many purposes and a master of none. He means it jokingly. And she's correcting him and saying, you're a master of all. You're a master of everything quantum, and you are a teacher of the quantum heart. So that is interesting that these two are working together, and three, actually, if you consider Jerry Hicks. So there was just, it was like a little love fest of very intelligent beings who also know how to operate from the heart center. So that's what happened when you guys begin to ask me who else hangs out with Wayne Dyer. Okay, on to your next question. This question is one from one of my favorite ACIM teachers of all time, so I'm going to go ahead and answer Janine's question. The question is, when love hurts, is it still love? He was very interested in this question, and this was recently, just a few minutes ago before the channeling. I was sitting here pondering that, because it's such a profound question, and I knew that you guys would love his answer. So I quickly went and Googled his perspective of forgiveness, because I thought that's what he was going to say, right? And he stopped me and he's like, "No, put it down. No, that's not where I'm coming from anymore at all. I have something completely different to tell you." So here you go. This is what he said. When love hurts, is it still love? The answer is, when the sun burns, is it still the sun? When water freezes, is it still water? When love hurts, it's transforming you into your next stage of spiritual evolution. It is a vast transformation, and it is perfect. Before the butterfly flies, it feels as if it will be in an indescribable darkness, indefinitely. This is love being transformed by trust. Trust grows wings, then love flies. He just has a way with words, doesn't he? Someone expanded upon this question in chat, and he brought my attention to your chat screen, and you're asking now, why would true love hurt? And he stated, why would anything be untrue or out of order with the divine perfection of Source's plan for you? This is something that he and I have been discussing a lot. You know, when I'm sleeping, he's been coming to me as well. And in my experience with him in the astral field just last night, he was describing to me that love is perfect in every aspect of it, even when you're afraid of it, even when it's going well, when it's not, in all of those stages. And he said it doesn't make it true or untrue or right for you or wrong for you, that love is perfect in every stage, and that would not make it untrue. It would just, untrue implies fear, is what he stated with that. Okay. Let's go on to another question about ascension. And the question is, have you ever heard of ascending into the light body? He nodded yes with that. And he stopped me at that time when you asked this question about an hour ago. Someone asked me this question, and he stopped me and he said, ascension is seen in different ways. From this perspective, I see it as a perfection and a quickening of the physical, the mental, the emotional, and then the soul, which is a combination and a transformation of all of these bodies. All of these bodies are fractals of your light body, and they all require a quickening. So I'll finish the rest of the question at this point in time, because he interrupted me. Have you ever heard of ascending into the light body? And if so, why did your body have to die? He's saying to me now, the simple answer is it didn't. And he says there is no regard to death. There's no truth to actual death. And the music of the soul is when the heart is fully expanded, and that music is infinite. It does not die. It simply is orchestrated in a different way, in a way that you choose. And, you know, it was interesting when he was first answering this question about an hour ago, he was showing me the image of an orchestra. And, you know, I recently went to an orchestra, and he popped in the orchestra. I didn't tell anybody in my family this. But this was one of my first experiences with him. I was having such a hard time, you know, up until this moment, connecting with him. And he sat down kind of in front of me, and he put his face right in mine, and he got at my eye level. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, seriously, now is the time that you choose? I'm here all day and night. I'm trying to enjoy this symphony. And he said, you are the symphony. What do you choose to hear right now? And he was kind of bringing my attention to my heart. And I said, oh, I love oboes and I love clarinets. I'm a woodwind person, right? And I'm like, where is this going? And he said, you need to listen to this story. He is a teacher. He is a storyteller, and he does this through his stories. He said, just please humor me. So I did. And he said, so you like woodwinds. Why do you like woodwinds? And I said, I love the richness. I love the profundity. I love the warmth. And he said, where do you feel them in your body when you hear them? And I said, oh, I don't know. And he said, okay, now listen to the woodwinds with your heart. And at that point in time, it was a pretty profound, complex portion of this orchestrated piece. And it was a cello piece. And it was primarily strings with this wonderful celloist. And I'm like, but I don't hear them now. I hear the cello. I hear the beautiful soloist. And he said, yeah, but if you hear it with your heart, you'll hear it in a different way, and you'll feel it in your body more, and this will produce a really rich experience. And this is what you need to work on when you listen. Compassionate listening means pulling your thoughts of what you have colored, what you have defined and discerned and ascertained in every emotional state as being a certain way. If you drop into your heart, you're going to listen in a way that's rich and profound. So that was really, really interesting. And then he went through the entire orchestra, and he was comparing the unique roles of each instrument with a certain value system towards every emotion. And he said the woodwinds, they're a little bit quirky. Of course you would like them. They're a little bit profound, but you wouldn't know it because they're joyful and they're blissful, but they have a deep profundity to them. So are you listening to that? You know? And then we went on to, I really have a deep fascination with, you know, the bass players, the deepest ones. And they're so profound. And I just kind of was watching them and watching how it looked like they have to struggle so much to play. And he was talking to me about that. He said, yeah, it's like that. And there is a different dimension, to that level of music. And that can be comparable to the foundation of trust as well, because they actually don't struggle. They're quite comfortable. Take a look at them, look at their seats, and look at their the way that their stools are, and the way that they kind of bend one leg to the side so that they can reach. He said they're not uncomfortable at all. They are the foundation to this entire orchestra. And I said, oh, so you're trying to tell me trust is the foundation? And he went through each of the instrumental parts in such a profound way. And he talked a lot about trust and our safety. And he wanted us to understand that we cannot have safety and love without trust. And that was the most important thing that I learned from that orchestrated moment. Pun intended, he just cracked up. You're not going to make me start laughing. Normally he makes me laugh. And I wanted to discuss something with you about that, because you can't live in the present moment without trust. And one of the primary things that he's been teaching me is how to live in the present moment from compassion, from love, from trust, and from a certain allowance that steps you into that. So I asked him, well, how do I go about doing that? Because I'm a really head-centered person. He's been such a teacher for me, quite honestly. And many people think that I'm a heart-centered person, but quite honestly, my head rules about 50% of the time. And then I drop in, and I have to really constantly rein in and discipline my thoughts. And he taught me a lot about that. So I asked him, how do I do this? How do I live in this present moment and connect to my purpose in the way that you taught when you were here with us? Because he was so connected to life purpose. And he said to me, you do this by recognizing that the moment you live in right now is the only moment there is. And he said, this is the isness that you've been trying to teach people. And he expanded further and said, simply live one moment at a time. Awareness occurs when you recognize that you are the being who orchestrates all the thoughts that are coming through in your head. You are in control of each present moment. And that's God within you. And he and I went on and had a further discussion about wasting time and how I felt that I had so much to do and that I had this big long list of things, of stuff. I'm sure many of you can relate to this, right? And it was just piling up and piling up and piling up. And I'm like, and people are expecting me to write books now. And I'm like, and I'm ready, but I've got all this stuff that I'm doing, like, our quantum alchemy process, which is taking forever. So many things coming up. And he said, well, Dolores didn't waste time. When she got ready to write, she just started writing. She didn't think about what moment that is. She didn't worry. She didn't become agitated or intolerant with herself or impatient, or she didn't really experience fear-based emotional frequency. She just said, okay, I have stuff to do. So how would I like to feel when I do those things? So he went on to express to me, he said, don't waste any present moment, because worry is a waste of the present moment. Agitation, impatience, frustration with yourself, all the ways that you pick yourself apart in your inner critic states, that is what's causing the whole waste of time principle. And he went on to express to me that practicing awareness within each negative thought as it arises, validating the right for such a thought to exist, but then giving permission to the higher self to take over by asking yourself, what would I rather feel instead if I could choose to feel better in this moment? That was the switch. That's the shift, as he called it. And he said, once you decide how you're going to feel, just stand in the presence of full acceptance and allowance of this feeling for at least the next 5 minutes. And of course I was curious, and I asked him, well, why 5 minutes? And he said, because in 5 minutes, none of everything that you're going to worry about is going to matter. So this is a practice that he described to me. He said it will initially require discipline. Our thoughts like to hang on to that, Oh, you want me to say it again? Okay. He said, I'll back up a little bit. He said, give permission to the higher self to take over. when you're worrying, when you're agitated, when you're trying to drop into the heart center from agitation-based moments, and especially anxiety. This is really good with anxiety. He said, you have to ask yourself, what would I rather feel instead if I could choose to feel better? And once you decide how you're going to feel, vow to stand in an acceptance and allowance of that feeling for the next 5 minutes. And I asked him, why 5 minutes? Well, I will look at things and I'll say, what about for the next hour? Because I'm kind of brave like that. What about for the whole week? What about for the whole month? And he's like, oh, no. So he's like, if you can stand in the next 5 minutes, that proves to your inner critic state that you can manifest from the now moment, from isness. And that's why it's important. And then anything else that you're worrying about won't matter over the course of those next 5 minutes. You will be a completely different person. I didn't believe in mental. I started practicing it. I'm like, a completely different person? He's like, yeah, you operate from a completely different frequency, which means for those next 5 minutes, you'll shift into a completely different space. And then what mattered to you before just really, really won't. So he said that this practice, again, requires a lot of discipline, a lot of practice. And I asked him at that point, I said, well, what about if my negative thoughts creep in? What if they, come in and I just get lost in them again? Because you know how the human brain works, and from the brainstem and then onto the hypothalamus, and we tend to, at that point, just the brain takes over, and it's like, none of this matters because you've got a dental appointment to get to, and you've got, things to go towards, and you've got so much to do. So you really just don't even have time to be doing this practice. Like, that's where my brain will go anyway. So he said, if more negative thoughts creep in, such as how you should have done things, how terrible things have been in your past, or how they are right now, or how they even could be in the future, he asked me to tell you guys to remind yourselves that feeling this way can't change even one moment of that. It can't change a moment of the past, and it's not going to change a moment in your present. If you're still thinking that way, your moment is going to be the same. He said only positive, thoughts can really help you change something and manifest it into a positive future. And I asked him about negative thoughts from that point, and he said, well, both positive and negative thoughts hold supreme power to create the present and the future. So which will you choose? If you want a positive change, only the positive thoughts are going to do that. If you keep thinking about the negative, you're going to breed more negative. So more of the same negativity, are you going to choose that, or are you going to choose a supreme, powerful, positive moment? That's how he addressed it to me. There was a question that I wrote down to him the very first time I talked to him, and this is the question that I ask every being the first time I talk to them. I asked him, who are you? And he giggled and he said, I am a student of human nature. And this has always been my goal. So I found that interesting. We got into a conversation about human nature, which led to a conversation about manifestation. And it's been so interesting because he was such a profound manifester. And I asked him, I'm like, what about the frequency of desire? Is that the key to manifestation? Because in 6-dimensional manifestation, it's about the law of specificity. And he and I were discussing that. He has a profound reverence for Mary Morrissey's Prosperity Plus class and her view, which is between 5th and 6th dimensional views of manifestation based upon the depth of how far you allow yourself to go in her works. And he reminded me that, yes, the law of specificity is important, but what's better is allowing your desire to not fluctuate. So even within the law of specificity, he described to me that your point of reference and relevance for desire is going to change based upon your motivation. For those of you who understand his work, being called the king of motivation and a teacher of motivation, he directly related to me that motivation is what fuels your desire. It's like he described it to me like being in a car, and he told me a story, of course, as he often does. And he said, you really need to listen to this because I have this interesting thing going on with my car. And for some reason, the gas tank doesn't fill all the way up, and I haven't been able to figure it out. And he said, it's the energy and frequency of your impatience. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's something that's wrong with the gauge. And I brought it into the mechanic and he fixed it. And he's like, and yeah, and then it broke again, didn't it? And I'm like, yes, as a matter of fact, it did. And then he expressed to me that, it'll be something that I learn and something over time, that the energy that's coming through from my desire, which is fueled by my motivation at any given point in time, is the same as what I was doing when I was putting fuel into my car. And he said, and this is for each of you. And my car was a direct reflection of my impatience. And my impatience became my motivation for everything. And he's like, yes, you're a great manifester, but you manifest tons of stuff that you don't want, because on the way to getting what you do want, you get derailed by impatience-based motivation. And, and I always thought that that motivation was desire, positive, passion, all of these things. And what he taught me is that motivation can come from any space, negative or positive. So for me in that instance, my energy was, I was actually just like ready to get the fuel in my car. So I'm like there with the handle, at the gas pump, and I'm pressing down the button. I'm like, oh, I gotta get somewhere, I gotta go. Always gotta go somewhere. And he stood beside me at the pump one day and he's like, you really need to like maybe slow that down. Maybe you can go half throttle on that. Maybe you can back up your energy. And I thought he meant like me, but he had kind of a double entendre going on there. There's actually some interesting thing going on with my pump that I recently found out yesterday. And he laughed when the person told me about this. He was sitting in the car laughing. He's like, I so told you. I found out that my car has some kind of an issue that if the gas goes in it too quickly, there's a lever in it that shuts off, and it shuts off the gas tank from filling all the way up. And it just won't fill all the way up then. So he sat there and gave me a little message about my passion actually turning into a desire that was a negative motivation that was fueled from impatience. And he told me that I needed to breathe and slow down. So yes, the channel is learning things here. All the things that I teach you guys, I'm having to learn them for myself. So back to that, he told me at that point in time, he said, what you desire, remember, is already yours. And this is something that he and I had been talking about just a few days ago. And I sat here and wrote a bunch of notes about manifestation. And he said, it's why would you be impatient or intolerant towards something? Because everything already is. You're going to get to where you're going. Just slow down and breathe and let your motivation be positive and patience-based. He said, about manifestation, in order to master abundance financially, which is what he knew that all of you will ask, one must master their purpose. So as you guys know, he is really, really strongly aligned towards helping people find their purpose in a very simple way. And that if you start from a simple way, then you will master that. And from what he stated to me in his teachings to me this past week, mastery, he believes, is the key to that abundance. And when you begin to trust your connection to your higher self, trust is actually the key to the mastery. Trust will slow everything down and cause your motivations to become less impatience-based, less agitation-based, less stress-based, less intolerance-based, and full of a frequency that he likes to call grace. So he and I have been talking about grace as being the actual frequency that is the closest thing from his sixth-dimensional perspective right now to abundance. So there you have it, that the grace when you trust is what causes you to manifest things in a way that's more aligned to your own personal mastery and your own personal life purpose. What else? So he said and he really wanted me to share this with you guys, he states, when people are not abundant, it's due to their lack of fulfillment within their life purpose, obviously, but this lack of life purpose is a result of the lack of trust in one's connection to one's higher self. Grace is the key to connecting to your higher self. He went on to state that most people, the reason for this is because when we were infants, that we really didn't have any earlier discoveries about any connection to our higher self being in existence at all. We're just kind of going along with the flow of what everyone else wanted us to be. And, when one is aware of one's true divinity, at that point in time, he states that it's impossible to say, I will be abundant, because I will be implies that I am not presently abundant in the now. And when operating within the energy of want, when you say, I want to be abundant, you're sending a message to the universe that says, I am not abundant. There's a lack-based premise there. You see what I'm saying? And it's easy to unconsciously program yourself within that because your mind begins to offer experiences that then match that energy of lack. So instead, he would like for you to ask yourself, what would I feel like if I have what I want? What would I feel like? So not just the law of attraction from the visual, although he does love the law of attraction in its present state of visualization. If you pull in the frequency of what you would like to feel into that vision, it becomes incredibly explicit, and the universe hears that as a signal, and you begin to operate from that belief system because the feeling state gives permission for grace to occur. No matter what the feeling state is, if you give yourself permission to feel angry, that's grace. If you give yourself permission to feel love, that's grace. If you give yourself permission to forgive, that's grace. There is a level of higher frequency that you feel in your body when you give yourself that permission to accept yourself exactly as is. That is grace. So grace begins by acceptance. So it's not, I want to manifest a new house. Okay, I must do this first. I must do that first. I must move out of the house I currently have. I must sell the house I currently have. Must rent out the house I currently have. If you come from a place of, I must do this in order to get that, that's not really grace. That's the opposite. So grace is, I'm simply going to allow and accept exactly how I feel in the moment, stand in trust, and give myself permission to be as is. Grace is similar to, although a much higher frequency, it's a little bit similar to mercy. And the story that he gave me about grace is in relation to bills, because he said that many of you, when you think about grace, you think about grace periods. For instance, if you haven't paid your mortgage on time and there's like a 30-day grace period, right? During that time, for sure that you have 30 days. So you may get phone calls from the mortgage company, but you know that no matter what's going on, that all is forgiven during that time. So it's not what will things be after that point in time? Are they going to go take my house? It's not how am I going to get there? It's in that moment, you take that gift. Grace is actually a gift. It's not an action. It's something that's given to you. And it is a direct connection to source. It connects you directly to your higher self when you operate in grace. So let's move forward. He then stated, by pulling in higher frequencies, especially that of grace, those feelings into your body, you can reprogram the egoic subconscious mind to be in harmony with the infinitely abundant universal mind where all manifestation originates. So when you connect more to that universal mind, that's source. That universal mind is source. And then any undesirable life circumstance that you have, he said, please remember that those undesirable circumstances are based on a habit of adopting and then consistently practicing negative habits. So as you all know, that's how the brain likes to operate. It's like, oh, fight or flight, survival mechanism. That worked for me before. I'm going to latch onto that again because that's all that I know. That's what's working. Why should I change it? Because if I change it, I might not survive. We don't need that anymore. Grace wipes that away, all of that. So all of your negative habits stem from those lower frequency thoughts, and these bad habits are changed by the discipline of practicing new behaviors. I need to start answering some of your questions. He's talked a lot, so let's see what you have to say. Okay, just going to scroll up to your questions for a moment. Can the emotional freedom technique be used for diabetes type 2? He says there is often what is perceived as a large step between your mind and your body if your belief helps you understand and express your emotions, no matter what they are. If you are releasing that in emotional freedom technique, first by validating what's negatively there, and then by shifting into something positive, no matter what the modality is, it will help. EFT or anything, it will help. Is it required that you have a modality to heal through grace? No. But your belief is required. No matter what your modality is, your belief and your trust is required. So trust your practitioner, trust yourself, trust the connection that you have to source, and begin to visualize and feel and validate first what you need to release that is the foundation of the disease. So he said, first, please find out what is your foundation. What is the emotional foundation? There is an emotional foundation to everything that we call disease. He doesn't like that word. Whenever I say it, he corrects me. And he says there's no such matter of disease. That is a concept that's created by humans. And he says that diabetes is normally the result of an emotional state where people are coming from a space of lack and a lacking of sweetness in life, a disconnection to your sweetness. You're lacking the sweetness in life. When you look around and you can't find anything sweet anymore, that's normally the foundation for that. So find out what emotional state caused you to lose that sweetness. When you do that, you can transform that with grace, and any modality would work at that point in time. And yes, he does strongly condone the emotional freedom technique. Let's move on. Okay. The next question is, how can I find out what my spiritual gifts are? I know that I'm a healer, but are there more gifts that I'm not aware of? He states it's not your action, it's not your doing state as a healer, but how do you feel when you're healing? What is good about it? What makes you feel good when you're a healer? When you change your definition of that, of your titles, he's saying, of the word and the role healer, and you step forth and you release roles, what he has called quite often the shift, causes you to really step into an alignment with a trust and source within you. So that shift begins, and that is the synchronicities that cause you to line up. He defines it like a treasure hunt. And he's expressing to me that when you're finding your gifts, that you begin to trust how you feel, and then you validate to your egoic self that something positive happened that was different than what it always latched onto, which was fear and lack. And when you do that, when you formulate that validation to the ego, it's not that your ego is bad or not necessary. It's that when you validate and you begin to prove to the ego that there's something different other than what the ego thinks it is, this shift from ego and all the shift from ego-based definitions into more higher conscious applications occur. So at that point in time, when you're shifting into higher applications of your purpose, you're not thinking, I am a healer, I am a channel, I am a doctor, I am a nurse. You are working with the awareness of compassionate service, and you're saying, I am source and I am here to give. I am source and I'm here to serve. I am source and I'm here to love. You see how he's shifting the roles into the feeling states pretty significantly? That's how you find your purpose. This is something that when I channel Yeshua, it always comes through as well, that he states quite often, your purpose is not your action state, it is your being state. So when you first begin what Wayne Dyer calls the shift, there's this initial discomfort. And he wanted us to address that a little bit today, because it's a little bit of the ego goes, oh no, I don't feel good. And it actually goes right into the physical. When I'm making my shifts, I get extreme headaches. I'm like, oh, I'm feeling something different, and I'm not used to feeling something different. So my body tends to incorporate that and project, into. But when you get that level of discomfort, that is actually a synchronicity that you're highly aligned towards stepping into a purpose. Okay? So don't be afraid of the discomfort. That's not a negative synchronicity. But aside from that, you'll also feel just an underlying level of something that some of you may attribute initially to anxiety, but is actually excitement. And Yeshua calls this agitation. Wayne Dyer calls it excitement. So they have a little bit of a different view on ascension in this regard once you begin to shift. So whatever you want to call it, I'm going to call it agitation for the moment, because so many of you are coming to me and saying, I'm agitated, I'm anxious, I'm restless, I can't sit still, I'm unsettled. There are a lot of words that you use for it. Wayne Dyer calls this your excitement. And this is how you know that regardless of what it is, regardless of what frequency it is and how it transforms itself, it may start with agitation, but it's going to bring you bliss. It's going to go into excitement at some point. And you're going to be guided by that state. Not by your action state, but when you're restless and when you're agitated, you're then going to initially begin to also feel excited about something, which is going to step you into a happiness and a bliss at some point. So just because you're agitated, please don't stop. Don't view that as a negative synchronicity. Let's move on to your next question. I apologize, I'm not getting to many questions. He just has a lot to say, and I knew this would be the case. He's such a wonderful storyteller. The question is, Dr. Dyer, where are you now and what are you doing as your purpose? He said, when I was incarnated, my purpose was allowance, it was surrender, and it was compassionate service. And all of them felt so guided, and I felt so blessed to be your student. I knew that would eventually come out, the student-teacher thing. He rarely calls himself your teacher from this perspective. And from this perspective, he said, my purpose is grace, and my purpose is compassionate awareness. So he would like to teach us from this perspective a new principle, and not new being new ever. He has explained to me that nothing is new under the face of the sun ever, but that we have forgotten our connection to source within us in this respect. There are many people who taught grace, but it seems to just go like this, just over our heads somehow. And it's like we get it and we get it logically, but it's not sinking in a compassionate way where we're pulling it into our heart centers. So his purpose from this perspective is to teach grace. Let's move on to one of your next questions. Oh, you asked where was he? He said, I'm everywhere. He is describing himself as being in a parallel earth environment. This is something that reminds me of a lot of the works of Dolores Cannon, where she believes in the parallel earth environments, as do I. And he says that he definitely has ascended into one of those environments. But from his standpoint, there's no loss, there's no death, life continued just as is. And he's living a life with a close connection. In his mindset, it's as if nothing ever happened except a shift up into a higher frequency. So for those of you that are operating from third and fourth dimensional components, you won't see him, because in the quantum world, he's not matter. And in that way, matter doesn't exist. So he is stepping into that period of time where matter is inapplicable, but his life is still very much the same. So for his family around, you're still with him and he's still with you. You may not view it that way, but he does. He hasn't left your side. Okay, so next question. That's a good one. Can you please ask Wayne whether he was completely cured of leukemia by John of God? He said, of God is applicable. He said, I simply believed in this modality and I believed in my ability, God within me. Can he explain for us how John of God did so and how we can replicate it? He said, it's a matter of belief. I believed in this modality. I trusted this being and I trusted myself. But more importantly, I believed at that point in time that I could completely go into a state of remission, and for a time I did. Did he enjoy the memorial? I watched it on YouTube. It was very moving. He says, I did, and it was moving, it was touching, and I simply am doing my job. I still am. I was then. I am now. It was very loving, and thank you. Oh, okay. This is an interesting question that he wants to talk about people who are struggling with nerve damage. The question in this statement is, thank you for being the vessel to my many healings. I have one disorder that has not completely gone, but is less. CPRS. Okay, I don't really know what that stands for. If you want to type it in chat, it might be helpful to me personally as the channel. I am working on sending light. Do you see a way that could help me into full healing of the nerve damage that surgically occurred? He's giving me a unique story. Okay. He said, and his daughter may remember this, there was a point in time where he had some issues with his foot, his left one specifically, and he was concerned that it had some nerve damage, and he would have these issues with the foot constantly feeling like it was on pins and needles, and he'd be sitting down at an event. He said after writing so many books that he also felt he had some nerve damage there for a while in his neck and some pains in his neck. And it was the same thing, that he would get these pins and needles feeling, and then sometimes it's like it fell asleep. It's almost like, you know, that feeling of when your foot falls asleep, when you kind of, even without nerve damage, that happens to all of us, right? And you're sitting and your foot's up underneath your bottom. So, and then when you get up, you lose your ability to have your brain synapse properly, right? So the emotional frequency embodies that of belief that you can recover from that, because it's quite scary when you have nerve damage and your entire body collapses under that weight, and then you feel like you can't even feel it. And then when you do feel, you know, that extremity, that portion of your body that lost something, whether it be your foot, in this case, he was sitting, he's telling me that he was sitting normally, not with his foot like I described, but just normally. He always just kind of sat normally, you know, legs straight like that, you know, a little bit of width in between, you know, when he would speak sometimes. And his later stage of his life, his feet would fall asleep. And sometimes when he had to get up to leave the stage, you know, to go thank people or just to walk off the stage, it would just collapse. And he said that happened really, really specifically at his very last speaking event, you know, before he left this earth, you know, and he was around age 73. And he said, and when I got up from the chair, I just completely couldn't feel my foot. And I thought, well, in this moment, and the frequency of feeling something that changes your belief in the moment when your body is collapsing under you, was really kind of a weird thing. He said, I had to switch because I thought I was going to fall in front of people and that people were going to have to pick me up off of the stage. And he said, I know I was 73, but I felt like I was 103 in that moment. So he said in order to prevent himself from falling, he did the same thing that he did during the time when he witnessed a miracle for himself when he was climbing up a stairway and St. Francis actually lifted him. That was another one of his stories that you guys are familiar with. I know I'm getting off on a tangent, but so is he. I'm just following him. Sorry. So St. Francis is one of his dominant spirit guides. That was another one of your questions. Yes, they're strongly connected. So what happened is the same thing that happened in his miracle when he had the bum knee. and St. Francis, when he was trying to carry his friend up the stairs, who had lost, whose nerves had gave way. He had his friend on his back and he was rushing up the stairs, and he didn't, for a moment, he stopped and thought, well, how am I going to do this? But the how am I going to do this, much like when he was on stage, did not go into the I cannot do this and oh no. It went into the how am I going to do this? Specifically, how am I going to do this? And when you ask yourself that kind of a question, it produces a frequency that he calls wonder. Now, I've been studying the frequency of wonder for a while now as a part of manifestation. And what he expressed to me in that moment is that okay, how am I going to do this? And then I wonder if I can do this, and I wonder how this is going to be. And he went to all those places. I wonder how it would be if I fall. You know this, for those of you who know the story about St. Francis and the miracle that he experienced. He went to this whole place of, I might fall down the stairs, and oh no, Wayne Dyer, falls all the way down these stairs, and people are hurt in the process, and he's hurt in the process, and it's terrible. And then he's like, okay, I don't like that. He switched into a different level of wonder. He didn't want to wonder about that. He was like, I wonder if I can run up these stairs. For a split moment, it crossed his mind, I wonder how it would feel if not only could I walk my friend up these stairs so that we can make it up on our tour, but what would it feel like if I could run? And in that moment, St. Francis, for those of you who know this story, lifted, he did his hands like this, and he felt like a jolt and a lift, and he literally ran up the stairs and carried his friend up the stairs. So when he almost fell recently before his passing at this conference, the same thing happened. He went into the frequency of wonder. He's like, well, I wonder if they're going to have to carry me off the stage. No, he he's completely cut that off from that point on. And he just said, I'm not going to wonder about something negative. I'm going to wonder about something that could be possible of I limped for a bit, just a little brief limp on one side, and then I get back up and I feel completely fine. So that frequency of wonder produces something that causes your body to change your brain state. Your brain chemistry literally changes by the frequency of wonder. So for the person who asked the question about the complex regional pain syndrome, that is a form of peripheral neuropathy that is incredibly complex. But the more you trust your body with the frequency of, I wonder if I can walk, I wonder if I won't have pain, and how I would feel if I could walk, and how I would feel if I won't have pain, and how I will feel if I can go walk around the block today. Just that changes things if you can keep it. But it's really, really hard though, and I understand that, because every time you fall and you evidence that you fall, then the ego mind goes back into you know what, you didn't do it, right? So it is a practice that takes time. I went through this, and he related back to his story when I struggled with extreme trigeminal neuralgia for about a year. And for those of you who understand trigeminal neuralgia, it's a nerve that comes from the brain into the cheek and the bones in your jaw and your teeth and your sinus cavities. Everything is in your face. And how I healed it was wonder, because what I did was I said, well, I've already evidenced that every single time I'm going to get in the shower, the water is going to splash on my face and I'm going to scream in pain. But what if that evidence could be different? What if just I could take a shower and just touch the water on just this one portion of my face? Like I would start out back here, and I played with wonder. I literally, when I had trigeminal neuralgia and I couldn't take a shower due to water touching my face, and that's how sensitive the nerves were on this right side of my face, I would put my head back a little bit like this and let the water only touch the back. And I'm like, oh, that was okay. And then, okay, what if the water only touches my ear? Well, it hurts a little bit, but it's not terrible. What if the water touches here? And I would kind of go deeper and deeper, and sometimes it would hurt and sometimes it wouldn't. But during the times when it wouldn't, I began to play with wonder more. Okay, if it hurt one time out of the 7 that I tried and collapsed in the shower in excruciating pain, if one time worked, that gave me a little bit of faith that something was changing in my nervous system. So when I had even an iota of belief that something was changing in my nerves, I began to do it 2 times a week. And I'm like, oh, I must be healing, because it happened twice this week that I didn't scream in pain. So by the time the 3rd time it happened, I was well on my way. You see how that works? Wonder isn't always an immediate response like it was with Dr. Dyer's experience of St. Francis of Assisi. So that's how you do it. Test it. Wonder requires constant testing, practice, and see how you feel. Let me look at some more of your questions here. We have a little bit more time. Okay. When you left your physical body, what was that like? And was the process how you thought it would be? How was it when you reunited with your father? He said, I reunited with many people and I saw them in their true form, which is formless and infinite. And it was love. It was a beautiful experience. It was quick. And I saw myself physically for a moment. And it was just brief. It wasn't a white flashing light. It wasn't a tunnel. All I felt was love. And I was greeted by loved ones. And then I heard my own voice. I heard it overlaid over the voice of my father. I heard that voice overlaid over the voice of his father. I realized the oneness and unity in everything. And it was a beautiful experience. It's not something I can give much relevance to with anything that you could understand in the now. But just know that it's love, that there was no fear, and that there is no pain. Okay. The question next is, I would like to know how we can look at people diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder from a soul and spiritual level. He said, could you understand the perfection of divinity within them in their own creation, that source connects to everything as perfect as is, that they have their own dharma? Should you understand from the point of non-interference, it would help you comprehend that they perceive separation to the greatest extent. And they do this so that when they stand in the purpose of unity, it is incredibly expansive. It is a highly evolved spiritual purpose. And this level of mental distress reunites them to their own heart center to a greater degree than we can ever comprehend not having that perspective. This is allowance, and they are allowing themselves to connect and disconnect in their own true divine nature, despite the natural consequences. And that is true trust. That's an interesting question. He likes it. Let's go with it. I work with a group of religious sisters. How do I help teach them about self-love? He said, if the Christ consciousness is within them, and this is how they feel and choose to believe, they are loving by giving. They are loving by serving. So teach them about compassionate service if they will, but can you teach them with examples? Can you show them with an example? Can you show them what self-love might look like? Teaching a group of religious people might not sink in initially, but you don't teach with your words. Teach by showing them. Serve them. Allow them to feel what it might feel like to be served. Give them that gift. We have a question about blockages. It's very interesting. The question is, I'm looking to remove blockages from my energy centers to receive more energy. I feel something is holding me back. Please help and guide me to release it. This is coming from a space of block. When you are interfering with your own belief by choosing to believe that you're blocked, by choosing to disallow your own divine nature, understand that allowance of that flow, allowance of the flow of surrender and surrendering to source involves letting yourself say, okay, I'm blocked. Let's be done. Let yourself be done. And then nothing is left undone. The story that he's sharing with me about that is going back to, when I felt the extreme block with the trigeminal neuralgia. He taught me a lot about that stage in my life. And he said, okay, so what really allowed you to step into grace at that point in time? And I said, well, it was a point in time when I said, I accept myself and love myself in the perfection of all that is. If Source wants me to have this inexplicably painful condition for the rest of my life, so be it. Let it be done. And in that moment, it was very bizarre. I experienced something that he called a quantum moment. For those of you who follow his work, you'll understand. And, in his movie that I recently saw called The Shift, he described to me what the quantum moment is. And there are 4 qualifications of what a quantum moment is. For those of you who want to know more about this, look at that movie. It's really great. He's one of the few beings that came to me and said, I have a movie, you must watch it. I didn't read any of his books, but he made me watch this. So the 4 qualifying moments for the qualifying things for having a quantum moment. Number 1 is that it's very vivid, very colorful. You'll remember sights, smells, all the senses feel like they're on fire. Number 2 is it's a surprise. It's nothing really that you expect. Number 3 is it's benevolent. And number 4 is it is enduring. So focus on that. When you're trying to remove your blockages, you can ask yourself the question about manifestation that he imparted to us earlier. What would it feel like if I could choose to feel differently in this moment? That's wonder. Start there. Wonder is a leap to grace, and grace is the foundation to the quantum moment. So the reason why he's sharing this story with you is because I experienced that, and he pointed out that I experienced things that I really didn't even understand I was experiencing. But it was a very vivid moment for me, because I remember that in that quantum moment, I was outside, and it was at that point in time when I just said, you know what? I guess I'm just going to be this way. It started randomly raining, because that's how Utah weather is. It's, sunny one moment, and I was going to the store, and I even had my little baby with me at the time. And I had her in a wrap on my back, and the rain had just smacked into my face, and I collapsed with her up underneath me. And I caught myself on the way down, and she was crying, and I was crying, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm like just bawling, and I'm like, okay, so be it. I'm going to be this way. I love you. I love me. I love the child on my back. I surrender. This is fine. I love myself exactly for as this is. And what happened was I was looking down at the concrete up underneath me where I had fallen, and my knee was bloody. And at that point, I didn't care. I didn't even feel the pain. I didn't feel the pain in my face. I didn't feel the pain at that point in my knee that I had bloodied. And I looked down, and there was a small little ant that had this huge piece of food that it was trying to carry into the crack of the sidewalk. And it was just struggling and struggling and struggling. And I looked at the ant, and I just kind of said, you got this. And so it is. And then the ant started like just running with this piece of food, and then more beings came and helped with the food, and it kind of went back into the crack. But there for a moment, the ant and I had a little one-on-one, and that was my vivid moment. I could smell the ant. Ants had a unique smell that I had never recognized before. It smelled a little bit like coconut oil. It was very strange. And I could I couldn't communicate telepathically with the ants, but I definitely felt like, wow, this ant is really showing me something. So, yeah, I looked at its antenna, and I could see every little minute portion of the antenna. And I was looking at it and I was going, wow, God is really beautiful. Like, this little creature can do all of these amazing things. And it just hit me in that moment. And I'm like, well, I'm this little creature. I can do all of these amazing things. And I just got up and I just walked home like nothing ever happened. And I never felt trigeminal neuralgia again. So that was my quantum moment. And from that point in time, I just felt it just endured. It just stayed, as he said, step 4 is it is enduring. I've never felt the pain again. And from that perspective, that allowance via surrender offered the grace that I needed to give myself, where I could say, I am capable of something. So hopefully that answers that very long explanation answers your question. But he was insistent that I share this story with you. Okay, let's look at the time. Yeah, we still have time. And let's look at some of your questions. Wow, there's so many. Give me a second to scroll. The question is about the moon. My husband is wondering, here's the question. My husband is wondering if the moon is a real celestial body or if the moon is projected. He said, in many of these questions, what would you say if I told you it's both? From every perspective, that there's a new creation? You are in soul groups, and every soul group has a different perspective. For some of you, it is a hologram. For some of you, it is a physical experience. And for some of you, matter doesn't exist at all. The earth is not round. It is not flat. It is different for each of your unique perspectives. Looking at more of your questions, just give me a moment. Can Wayne advise on how best to integrate physical pain without lowering one's own frequency on our journey of ascension? Acceptance is the frequency involved here. This is what you need here. Acceptance is a miracle. Oh, is he messing up my mic? Sorry, hang on. Okay, let me know if it's better. I know we have the Yeshua voice. It always happens when I'm channeling. So hopefully that fixed it. Is it better? Okay, we'll continue then. Let's repeat. Your dog barked. I'm sorry to disrupt your doggy. Can Wayne advise on how best to integrate physical pain without lowering one's own frequency on our journey of ascension? Okay. He said, acceptance is the miracle that is required here. Acceptance is a frequency of love that is very close to compassion. And when you accept all is as perfect projection and expression of divinity within you, then you will understand wonder, then you will understand grace, and then a healing will occur. What if you lower your own frequency? This is not a hierarchy. So be it. If it's lowered, let it be lowered. What's the worst thing that can happen? You get angry for a time, accept that. You're upset for a time, accept that. It is bringing awareness of the emotion, and then that emotion can integrate properly in whatever direction it requires. Just looking for another question. Give me a second. Did you consciously decide when to cross over? I had a beautiful, wonderful life, a beautiful experience. And while I did not consciously decide when, no one consciously decides when, I need to make that clear. I did decide that at any point in time that ascension would occur, I'd be fine. So it did occur shortly thereafter, but no, I did not consciously decide when. You have another question. He's pointing it out to me. Okay, how much is our decision of when to cross? Your decision on how, yes, that can be strong based upon either your fear or your acceptance or your extreme readiness. When is not applicable, how is more applicable. So you have more control than you think on that. Okay, he wants me to answer this one. Can you tell us why your body took on cancer? From your perspective, does the quickening during the ascension process provide any protection from physical earthly threats, from, for example, nuclear disasters, solar flares, etc.? Okay, he says these are two different questions, but that you're getting at the same thing. Quickening does not always provide protection from physical maladies. Quickening, protection is the wrong word, he's saying. That's not the word that he would use. Protection involves an implication of lack and fear. And he says, if you feel that you need to be protected for something, then you are not in acceptance, and that is not grace, and that is fear. So at that point in time, if you feel that you need to be protected from anything, that's not really a true quickening or a true ascension. So does it cause you to not be in alignment with that? Are you at that point in harmony with something completely different? He likes the word harmony as opposed to an alignment with. Whenever I use the word in alignment, he goes, no, you're either in harmony or you're in disharmony. So let's say that differently based upon a different wording. He says you are in harmony with peace, not physical earthly threats, not nuclear disasters. You would not be connecting with nuclear disasters if you're in ascension. But if you are going through quickening, you would also not feel any particular need to say, I require protection from anything. Hopefully that makes sense with how he's explaining it and how that's coming through me. Insofar as the question on why his body took on cancer, he said, I needed to experiment with the feeling of wonder, and I needed to see if I could get myself in remission. I needed to see if that was possible. The same thing occurred with Jerry Hickson. He and I had many conversations on our experimentation of the awareness of wonder and how that worked for us. Ask him if A Course in Miracles is a good thing to do at this time. He said, I am and was at that time always in harmony with the Course in Miracles and always will be. That's a big yes. Okay, he's nodding. Just looking for another question. Give me just a moment. That's so interesting that one of you just asked, I was recently diagnosed with trigeminal neuralgia and wondering how to cure myself, and he just explained that. That was fun. Give me just a minute. I'm getting a lot of stuff in the question and answer section that isn't really questions, so I'm just having to scroll through for just a second. That's beautiful. I had a hard time wrapping my brain around the fact that I was to know you and learn from you, Wayne, on that last cruise, and then you passed over shortly before. Same with Dolores Cannon. I was to train with her and she passed on. Can I manifest meeting you both at another point in time? He said, can you believe that you can? If you can, then yes. But can you look deeper for a moment and ask yourself, what could have been the purpose? What is it that you're meant to learn about people passing from your life, especially teachers? I implore you to go deeper. Okay, he wants to answer this one because it's about grace, and that's something he's been talking about. Being in a constant grace space, how does he suggest we stay in grace when other forces try to interrupt? He said, when you practice non-interference by following your own heart compass, because that is what non-interference is, remember, the compass is your heart center. It is your guide. It is your key back to divinity in everything that is, ever has been, and ever will be. So this is allowance of these emotions, not seeing them as something that's bad, not seeing them as something that's going to interfere, but seeing them as perfect as is. This is allowance. Allowance will keep you in that. And many masters, Gandhi did this, he says. Thich Nhat Hanh does this incredibly wonderfully because, as he's stating here today, Thich Nhat Hanh's purpose is compassionate service and compassionate listening. I really agree with him on that, with Thich Nhat Hanh and Gandhi, that both of their purposes were compassionate service and compassionate listening. So he's stating to me that he noticed that with masters of grace, that they did not fail to exhibit and experience negativity. They dropped into their heart centers and stepped in allowance and acceptance of that, as opposed to saying it should be something different. They allow for it, and that is the grace when you say it is perfect as is. And that pulls you back into your heart center. So the masters feel, they validate, they acknowledge, they accept. This drops them into the heart center. And then there's this purge. He calls it a purge. I call it a release because it's more gentle, but he's calling it a purge. And you just kind of yuck out there for a moment energetically, and you go, oh, I just feel absolutely terrible. But then it doesn't last for long. So it expels all that negative energy. It comes back up from your energy field, and then you're back in grace again. So it is a cleansing cycle. Okay? Oh, that's a good question. This question is, if you are not aware of your purpose, is it because you're not ready to see it? He said, you're always ready to see it. You just don't believe you are. It's there. It's in your periphery all the time. But you are initially resistant to it because you are afraid of the change that it will cause. Humans are naturally afraid of uncertainty. Humans do what they know. So when all you've ever known is something negative, you fail to stray from that pattern. It is a habit, and old habits die hard. What does he think the emotional cause of depersonalization is? He did his hands like this, and he said, can you perceive that there is a wall between us? If you can perceive it, what color is it? How thick is it? How far is it away, from you and from Pamela? Okay? So if you take that away, is the wall still there for you? Depersonalization is an implied energetic resistance that is there at all times. It is there initially for your benefit because you have operated within a fight or flight response for so long that to personalize something would be too much actualization. At that moment, it is a defense mechanism. When it continues, it can become a defense mechanism that's no longer needed. Okay, the question is, why do I love being alone? I even wish my beloved ones would just vanish sometimes. I can feel so agitated and only want animals around me. He said, and this too is a call to love. But at the time, it is a call to self-love, to loving yourself. Animals are the truest, most unconditional form of innocence that can arise on this planet, with the exception of newborn babies. With this being stated, could you simply receive their love for a moment and then allow their love to be a reflection and a call for you to love yourself in the same way that they love you? And then when this arises, you will be able to receive others' love. This is a fear of receiving love at a very deep level and a call to receive it from yourself. We have about 5 minutes, so I'm going to just go through your questions as quickly as possible. Thank you for your patience. Dr. Dyer, from your perspective now, is there a must-read book for us to read here? Thank you. He's nodding. He said, what is your soul in harmony with? What do you connect to? There are many that I loved. I love the Gita. Wishes fulfilled would be advisable at this point for many. A Course in Miracles is always advisable. That's an interesting question. Here it is. I feel that I am growing in grace and love. Sometimes others say I lack boundaries because I forgive so easily. Especially in love, am I fooling myself and ignoring my own? It stopped there. Your question stopped there. Okay. I'm going to assume, because he's saying you meant ignoring my own needs. Type it in chat if you're still here, Sherry. He said, if you believe that you are fooling yourself, it becomes the mind tricking itself into that belief. And the mind is a tricky device that way. Oh, are you ignoring your own boundaries? Boundaries are only necessary when you believe that protection is less necessary. Boundaries are coming from a space of lack. Let me process that for a second, because I didn't expect him to say that. Okay, yeah, he can continue. He says, boundaries might initially be necessary for purposes of self-love, and then when you explore trust and wonder, there's no need for a boundary. At that point in time, the law of attraction would dictate and pull to you only those who don't require boundaries. So for an outgoing boundary, it would not be necessary if you're harmonizing and unifying with the love that is surrounding you. Boundaries would not be necessary if you did not have fear. Forgiveness is always necessary. Forgiveness is vital and foundational to all that is. You can forgive without having expectations that anything would have been different, should have been different, or will be different. This is the difference. Okay, let's get another question. Dr. Dyer, how do you feel excited about studying something that just doesn't touch you? I'm a visual person, and studying with books or distance learning I struggle with. He said, I ask you to go deeper. That's been his statement with me for the past few weeks. Deeper, deeper, go deeper. I was sitting there just this morning and he said, what are your wants? What are your needs? I said, no, I don't feel any wants or needs. And he goes, deeper. So again, he said, I implore you to go deeper. If you wish to learn something because it excites you and invokes passion in your soul, you're going to learn at any pace and within any modality. And it would not matter at that point if it were visual, if you were auditory, if you were more tangible in nature. At this point, if your passion is truly there about the subject you are studying, then it would not matter. Parallel worlds question. Let's go for it. Is the parallel worlds, I'm misunderstanding your question. In the parallel worlds, do other timelines exist? Yes, in third dimensional parallel environments, they do exist. In fourth dimensional parallel environments, they do exist. Fifth, sixth, seventh, and beyond, time does not exist at all. Hopefully that answers your question. I have had a beautiful time with this. I've learned so much. Thank you so much for being here. And we offer our thanks to Dr. Dyer. He has been a pleasure to work with, and I have an interesting suspicion that my work with him will continue. Thank you again. And thank you for being the platform, being my student, being my teacher, being my friends, my family, my support system. Thank you for all that you do, all that you are, and more importantly, all that you feel. So with much love, I offer you a beautiful day. Thank you so much.